Okay.
She's going to tell us all about mosquitoes.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, thank you for attending tonight. This is hopefully going to be a super fun presentation. Thank you if you're tuning in virtually. Hi, my little cousin Leah. So yeah, I'm going to be talking to you today about mosquito control here in Citrus County. I'm going to kind of give a background about mosquitoes in general, kind of go through how mosquito control started here, why it's important, and then go back and forth between our older past and then mix it in with what we're doing today. So, interestingly enough, there are over 3,500 species of mosquito in the entire world. We have about 176 here in the United States. Here in Florida, we have about 80 species, and then here in Citrus County, we have a little over half of that, with around 47 species. So to kind of understand the rest of the PowerPoint, it would be super helpful to know the mosquito life cycle. This video will go into more detail, but they start from an egg, and a lot of people don't know that they are aquatic during their immature stages. And then they emerge and fly away as an adult, and those are the ones that bite us and can cause diseases. It's much easier and environmentally friendly to control them during their immature stages while they're still in the water, and they're not infective during this stage. So bear with me while I try to get this video to work. Will they be able to hear the video sound, Lindsay? Can you guys hear that?
They undergo complete metamorphosis. Oh. Culex mosquitoes lay their eggs on the surface of fresh water, or in areas that will be temporarily wet, like floodplains. The eggs float alone, or in groups that look like rafts. Eggs laid during winter can survive to hatch in the spring. Mosquito.
Oopsies. Thank you. All right, let's start over.
Mosquitoes go through four stages of development in their lives. They undergo complete metamorphosis. Culex mosquitoes lay their eggs on the surface of fresh water, or in areas that will be temporarily wet, like floodplains. The eggs float alone, or in groups that look like rafts. Eggs laid during winter can survive to hatch in the spring. Mosquito eggs hatch into larvae. The larvae live at the surface of the water and breathe through a tube. As the larvae grow, they shed their skin a few times. If mosquito larvae need to hide from predators, they can swim and dive below the water's surface. Mosquito larvae live a few days to a few weeks before they turn into pupae. They stop feeding just before they turn into pupae. The pupae live at the water's surface and breathe through two small tubes. Mosquito pupae do not eat, but they are active. They tumble below the surface of the water when disturbed. They remain in the pupal stage anywhere from 1 to a few days, depending on the water temperature. While inside the pupa, the larva transforms into an adult. The adult breaks out of the pupal case.
So, now that you've seen how a mosquito kind of forms and lives, where do they come from? They need water. Without it, they cannot continue their life cycle. So if we take away their water source, then they can't survive. And interestingly enough, they like water in like the weirdest places that you wouldn't even think they would be. All they need is a bottle cap full of water to survive and lay their eggs. And they can live in things like aquatic plants, tree holes, bowls of water that we leave outside, lakes, so they're pretty much everywhere. And here are a few more habitats on a bit of a larger scale. Things like drainage retention ponds, or dumping sites, or some things like wetlands or cypress swamps can breed mosquitoes as well. And on an even larger scale, if you're from here, you know that the west side of our county is marshlands and coastal. So there's actually a species of mosquito called Aedes tenurincus, and they're the black salt marsh mosquito. And they can hatch off in very large numbers and fly 25 miles to find a host. So we're the perfect breeding area for them, and they love it. These are some of the aquatic plants that breed mosquitoes, things like water lettuce, water hyacinth, and cattails as well. And this is a photo, actually, of Shannon. She still works at Mosquito Control. She is helping get some of the water hyacinth out of this lake. Imagine all of the mosquitoes that could live in that water hyacinth. It'd be almost impossible to find them or eliminate them in this situation. So we tried to get the plants out of there, and we also had a drag line that helped us do that. We'll talk more about the drag line later. But as you can see, it's quite the feat to participate in mosquito control. It's quite physical. And if you don't live near any of those larger habitats, but you have mosquitoes, then you or your neighbors are probably breeding them yourselves. Common backyard mosquito sources are things like fountains, bird baths, buckets, barrels, things that we leave out, kids' toys. Neglected pools is another one that we see a lot. Things like tires, ponds, any still standing water, they like to breed in. They don't like anything flowing. So how many of these habitats do you have in your yard? You don't have to raise your hands, but I'm sure it's a lot of us. So Florida is the perfect habitat for mosquitoes. Like I said, we're coastal, we're marshlands. We are also a peninsula, so we have a lot of ports of entry, even in imports, exports, things that we bring in, people's luggage, imported materials can carry the mosquitoes in them or their eggs. So we're the perfect breeding ground for them. So you might be asking yourself, or it might be a rhetorical question at this point, why do we have a mosquito control program? Because mosquitoes are vectors of bloodborne diseases, things like West Nile virus, Eastern equine encephalitis, which is a disease in horses, dengue fever, chikungunya, Zika virus, malaria, yellow fever, the list goes on. And fun fact, only the adult female can bite and pose a health risk. The adult male, he's kind of a pollinator. He just, goes around to flowers and drinks plant nectars. He's kind of like a bee. But the female, she's the one who takes our blood, and she needs the protein in our bloods to form her eggs and lay more mosquitoes. And as you can see, she can fill up and get quite full with our blood. And she'll lay about 100 or so eggs at a time. It's a lot. The world's deadliest animal. You would probably think it's something like a shark or a crocodile. I definitely thought it was a shark, but it's actually the mosquito. And this number, this 725,000 people a year that mosquitoes have killed, this number has actually gone up to 1 million worldwide that mosquitoes have killed. Mostly in Africa, things like malaria is still a huge deal. Even though we don't personally see those effects here in the United States, it's a worldwide problem. And this is an interesting video about how mosquitoes suck our blood, if anyone was curious.
Sheet retracts. See it bending back? This is the deadliest animal in the world. Mosquitoes kill hundreds of thousands of people each year. The most vulnerable people, children, pregnant women. No other bite kills more humans or makes more of us sick. So what makes a mosquito's bite so effective? For starters, they're motivated. Only females bite us. They need blood to make eggs. And a pool of water for their babies to hatch in. Even a piece of trash can hold enough. At first glance, it looks simple. This mosquito digging her proboscis into us. But the tools she's using here are sophisticated. First, a protective sheet retracts. See it bending back. If you look at a mosquito's head under a microscope, you can see what that sheet protects. Inside there are 6 needles. 2 of them have tiny teeth. She uses those to saw through the skin. They're so sharp you can barely feel her pushing. These other 2 needles hold the tissues apart while she works. From under the skin, you can see her probing, looking for a blood vessel. Receptors on the tip of one of her other needles pick up on chemicals that our blood vessels exude naturally, and they overdo it. Then she uses this same needle like a straw. As her gut fills up, she separates water from the blood and squeezes it out. See that drop? That frees up space to stuff herself with more nutritious red blood cells. With another needle, she spits chemicals into us. They get our blood flowing easily and give us itchy welts afterwards. And sometimes, before she cries herself away, she leaves a parting gift in her saliva. A virus or a parasite that can sicken or kill us. There's nothing in it for her. The viruses and parasites are just itching a ride. But this is what makes mortal enemies out of us and mosquitoes. They take our blood. Sometimes we take theirs. But often not soon enough.
So who knew that mosquitoes had 6 needles that they bite us with? I did not know that either. Very cool. So mosquito actually means little fly, and a large portion of eastern Florida was actually called Mosquito County. Malaria and yellow fever ran rampant through here, and Florida was essentially uninhabitable. Tourism was pretty much non-existent, especially not on the scale that it is today. Living here was pretty much unbearable. And if you did live here, you definitely had the risk of catching something like malaria. And Mosquito County is where Orange County is today. And who knows what's in Orange County? Disney World, right? Has anyone ever wondered, why isn't there any mosquitoes at Disney World? Well, if you're curious, definitely Google it. It's very cool. They actually built the park to where they don't let any water pool up in the area, and they always keep water flowing if they have some sort of fountain going. So it's a very interesting read. I wish we all had buildings like that everywhere that didn't help mosquitoes live. And the Panhandle was actually called the Malaria Belt. Some facts about malaria. Residents suffered from mosquito-borne diseases like malaria, especially in the Panhandle area. Malaria is caused by 4 species of protozoan parasites, and it's vectored by Anopheles mosquitoes, which are present here in Citrus County. This is a picture of Anopheles quadrimaculatus, which is something that we catch pretty frequently in our traps. It's still problematic in other countries, especially Africa, and it infects approximately 219 million people each year, with 660,000 deaths, mostly being children. So, we're really lucky here with our technology and our mosquito control that this isn't something that we have to worry about. It was eradicated here in 1950. There were about 8 cases in 2003. 65 of them were imported in 2012 cases here in Florida. So it does still occur. This is a cute video, speaking of Disney. It's called the Mosquito Scourge, and it's this ad that they put out about the malaria mosquito that helped raise awareness. We're just gonna watch the first half. Maybe. Oh, come on. Okay, now it gets a little silly with the dwarfs, but pretty cool graphic explaining the transmission of mosquito-borne disease. Oh yeah. Really? That's so cool. We actually have to watch that as part of our mosquito control onboarding, so. Yellow fever is another prominent mosquito-borne disease that was present here in Florida during our early beginnings. Again, now it's very prevalent in Africa and South America, places with tropical climates. It causes yellowing of the skin and jaundice, and it's transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which coincidentally is also still here. We catch this frequently in our traps as well. So if you can see the trend, if these diseases were present here, we do have capable vectors of those diseases in Citrus County. So it's very important in mosquito control. But in the 1700s and 1800s, it was a major problem, and our last epidemic, luckily, was in 1905, so not for a while. And there are vaccines available for travelers, so if you're going to any of those tropical places, get a vaccine. Oh, there's also this link down here, which I think I'm going to give her a copy of the slides, so you guys could check this out. There's USF. They have like an online library of yellow fever letters, which are cool, like diary entries of people who experienced yellow fever, and it's definitely an interesting read if you're interested in checking that out. So here's kind of an epidemic timeline of yellow fever and malaria in Florida. In 1877, there were yellow fever epidemics in Jacksonville and Fernandina Beach. They called it the state's worst Holocaust. There were 1,632 persons, and of those who were sick, 1,146 had the fever. Yellow fever epidemics were also in Manatee County, Key West, Plant City, and Tampa 10 years later in 1887. A year later in 1888, there was another epidemic of yellow fever in Jacksonville, and 26,000 people fled the city because they were so worried about getting it. In 1919, there was something called the Perry Project, which was the first non-military malaria control project in Florida in the city of Perry. And then in 1922, the Florida Anti-Mosquito Association was formed, and mosquito control districts were to follow. In 1925, our very first mosquito control district here in Florida was formed in Indian River. And then St. Lucie County, Broward, and Dade counties followed, and it coincided with Indian River County establishment. So a lot of our county lines were formed by these mosquito control districts. And I had to throw DDT in here because I think we all know about DDT and its effects. House spraying with DDT was commonplace in the late 40s, which is crazy to think about now, but people would actually spray this all over their house and on their wallpaper. It was supported by the US public health funds, so our public health, depended on using this DDT at the time, especially in malarious areas of Florida. And I've seen contradictory information on this, but from what I could find, it was banned in 1972. And its success in broad use caused pests to develop resistance, which is why nowadays, and at Mosquito Control, we rotate our chemicals every so often so the mosquitoes don't become resistant. And yay, Citrus County Mosquito Control District. We were officially started in 1952, and our local constituents actually voted for it. So we said, hey, are you guys interested in having a mosquito control? And residents said yes. So we became a working program officially in 1953. And currently we are an independent special taxing district. We're not affiliated with the BOCC or the health department. There are 60 other mosquito controls in Florida. Some of those are affiliated with their BOCCs or health departments, but again, we are not. And this is a photo of, I think this was our first director there on the left. His name was Harry, and that was back in the 50s. We were originally in Homosassa, that's where we started, but then we moved to Lecanto, and this is currently our building today. We were where the Homosassa Special Water District is now, and we moved here to Lecanto in the early 2000s. We have a way bigger space now. We sit on about 9.5 acres. We do have a helicopter hangar, a large chemical storage facility, a brand new office space. So we have tons of room to work and perform our mosquito control duties. This was a pretty interesting thing that we found just this week, actually. We were scanning records, and we came across this excerpt from the 1964 board meeting that they had on June 1st. And they were talking about the landing rate test that they did. So we still do this today. We go out to certain areas where there might be a lot of mosquitoes, and we just stand there. And we're like, okay, how many mosquitoes are gonna land on me in a minute? And that's called a landing rate. So at this time in Homosassa Springs, that day they had a landing rate of 300 to 500 per minute. That's a lot of mosquitoes. Believe it or not, there are areas that you can go to today, still in Homosassa, where this many mosquitoes will be on you. And today we call these service requests, but back in the day, if you had a mosquito problem, it was a complaint, which I thought was super funny. Yeah, so funny. It's a service request now, but it used to be a complaint. And this was our longest running director. His name was Harry Maynard. He served as director from 1968 to 1998. So he saw a lot of the early beginnings of our mosquito control and saw a lot of the evolution of our practices that I'm going to be going through now. So early on, we did have an aerial program. We had a fabric over wood plane. It was a single engine landcraft. We used malathion as an adulticide. We didn't larvicide yet. Adulticide is chemicals that we use to kill the adult flying mosquitoes, and the larvicides are what we use to kill the larvae in the water. So at this time, we mixed diesel fuel as a carrier for the insecticides. That blew my mind because that would not fly today. Flo told me it was called the Old Florida Formula Mix. So it was not environmentally friendly, and most operations were performed with trucks and hoses, and this thing on the right called a drag line. We used that to create ditches. And I wondered, why would we have ditches? Why would that help with mosquito control? Well, it drains the mosquito habitat and allows the fish to flow in and eat the larvae, which is pretty cool that they had that technology back then. This is a picture in Homosassa of one of the ditches that was dug with a drag line. And this one's kind of blurry, but they're also in Homosassa. It looks like they're using those stakes to kind of pick out where they want to put the ditch. Am I right, Mike? So this is a cool fact, speaking of the Works Progress Administration. Mosquito ditching was actually funded by the Civil Works Administration of the Works Progress Administration back during like the New Deal times in the Great Depression. Malaria control projects were funded by this. They wanted to eliminate those mosquito breeding habitats, and they dug more than 1,500 miles of drainage ditches between 1933 and 1941. But then a lot of environmental changes came in the 80s. We needed to access state lands and control mosquitoes where people were on the edges of state lands. They paid their taxes, they deserved mosquito control too. So we came up with these arthropod control management plans and decided to go in more of an environmentally friendly route to mosquito control and not use those harmful chemicals and diesel fuels. In 1987, that's when a lot of those environmental changes took effect, and we couldn't use diesel fuel anymore. We began using target-specific larvicides, things like Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, or BTI, which is a naturally derived larvicide that specifically targets the mosquito larvae in the water and nothing else. They also came out with insect growth regulators, things like Alticid that prevents larvae from becoming biting adults. And we couldn't use drag lines and perform ditching anymore because it changed too much of the environment and the ecosystem. So we weren't allowed to shift those areas anymore. And in the 90s, we continued to move in the right direction. We used things like Natural, which is another larvicide, BTI, Alticid again, Permethrins, which is a synthetic pesticide, but it's more naturally derived and it's less toxic because resistance became a concern with all of those older chemicals that we'd been using for so long. Mosquitoes were starting to become resistant, so we had to come up with other chemicals that they weren't resistant against. We also fogged on a schedule. So, for example, like on Monday night, we would be in Beverly Hills, or Tuesday night, we would be in Inverness. It was a heavy adulticiding program. We would have 8 fog trucks out every single night. Nowadays, we go where the fog truck is needed, depending on things like trap counts and landing rates. Then the fog truck will go out, but it doesn't just go out on schedule anymore. Surface films also came into play, things that laid on top of the water that suffocated the mosquito larvae so they could not survive. So do you guys remember running behind the mosquito fog truck as a kid? I hear this a lot. Back then, there was a huge fog cloud, and it was organophosphate malathion and diesel fuel, which came out as a thermal fog. But today, nowadays, we use an ultra-low volume application, and we use pyrethroids, which is less toxic and creates less of a cloud. A lot of people think that we aren't spraying when we go by their house, but we are, you just can't see it, like the older fog trucks. And this is a photo of some of our fog trucks. I think it was back in the 50s. And as you can see, that whole whiteness behind them, that's all the fog. I thought it might have been the sky or something, but no, it was the fog. And this is another old photo of our fog trucks. And this isn't Citrus County, this is from Levy County, but another cool photo of the fog coming out of the truck. And then this one, it was pointed out to me today that it's actually coming out of their exhaust pipe, so that's interesting. I don't know why that is, but yeah, very, very thick fog. And like I said today, we went from a reactive program, trying to go out every single night, killing the adults, to a more proactive program. We do a lot of larviciding nowadays. The fog trucks, again, only go out when and where they're absolutely needed. And we cut the number of our fog trucks actually in half. We only have 4 now. But as you can see, back in 2004, we larvicided way less than we adulticided. And today that's basically flip-flopped. In 2016 to 2017, we heavily larvicide now. And did you know the amount of permethrin used to treat a child's head in head lice shampoo would treat almost 3/4 of a football field in an average adult mosquito control ULV application? This blew my mind when I heard this, because you think, you know, when you're putting those adulticides out, that it's a lot of chemical. It's actually a very small amount. Because most of the products that we use are safe and have minimal impact on everything except mosquitoes if we use it according to the label. We also use biological controls. Pictured there in the middle, that's a mosquito fish. And they eat the mosquito larvae in the water. They're natural minnows that we find around here in our lakes. And we bring those to homeowners if they need them totally for free. And they control mosquito larvae all season long. So most of us don't actually work at night going around in the fog truck. Most of us work during the day. We inspect sites for mosquito larvae. We collect samples to bring back to the lab and ID, and we also do things like this where we educate the public. We do a lot of the larviciding, controlling the mosquito populations before they can fly because they're much harder to control that way, and that's when they're infective. So we don't want to wait till they become biting adults. We have a surveillance team where we trap mosquitoes to get population counts, see which areas in the county are the worst. We also use sentinel chickens to test for disease occurrences. Their blood gets tested every single week for antibodies to West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis. So we know, like, hey, there's disease happening here. We need to up our mosquito control in this area. We identify all of the mosquitoes that we find, and because not all mosquitoes are actually dangerous to people. So we can be like, okay, these are vectors. We need to concentrate our efforts here. These are not vectors. We don't have to worry about these. We have about 22 New Jersey traps, which is the one pictured there in the middle, which we have a whole slide on that in just a minute. 10 CDC traps, which is the one pictured at the top, and then 4 B&G traps, which there's not a picture of that on here, but we use a variety of different surveillance traps to target different species of mosquitoes. And this is a picture of the New Jersey light trap. We've been using this since the very beginning. We still continue to use it because we have such great historical data on it, and we can compare stuff that we find today to stuff that we found decades ago. We have 22 throughout the county, like I said, and we check them actually Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So we're always out checking traps. And this is one of our most wanted mosquitoes right now. This is the Asian tiger mosquito. It came over back in 1986. And it's most commonly found in those containers holding water around our houses, like we were talking about earlier. Things like buckets, bird baths, tree holes, household and natural containers. She lays her eggs on the sides of containers just above the water line. She lays her eggs there because once the water level rises, that's when they'll hatch. She's also an all-day biter. If you've heard of ankle biters, she's definitely an ankle biter. They like the smell of feet, interestingly enough. But they're very easy for homeowners to control. All you have to do is dump water every 3 to 4 days. Make sure you're not growing your own mosquitoes, because we can't make it to everyone's houses every single day. So that would be a great help to us, especially during the summer when it's really humid and there's a lot of rain. That's when the mosquitoes get really bad. And she is also a vector of dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. So she's definitely one that we want to control. So when in doubt, dump it out. This is called source reduction, and our technicians do this all the time. Every day that they go to service requests, they're looking for containers holding water and they're dumping them out. So what if I can't dump it out? Stock your pond with fish. Stock your neglected pool with fish. Large boats, keep it covered so water can't collect in it. If you don't, you and your neighbors will definitely have mosquitoes, unfortunately. And you can also protect yourself by remembering the 5 Ds of protection. So we've talked a lot about draining standing water, but also dawn and dusk. That's the period of the day when the most mosquitoes are out and active and looking for a blood meal. So just be careful during those hours. Wear long sleeves and long pants if you can. That's not hard now that it's the temperature's dropping, so that's nice. And then also defend yourself with mosquito repellent. Look for things like picaridin, DEET, oil of lemon eucalyptus. That one's a nice alternative to DEET. Look for those active ingredients because that'll really help keep the mosquitoes away. And we also usually do have a helicopter. Unfortunately, it went in for repairs this summer, and it had some sort of malfunction. So now we are down a helicopter, and we're looking for another one. But if you saw a plane out over the summer, it probably was us because we contracted out our aerial operations with Vector Disease Control International. Usually we're out adulticiding or larviciding with our helicopter, mostly larviciding. And hopefully by next summer we'll be able to keep doing this, get another helicopter. So here are some of our numbers from the 2020 season. We treated about 370,000 acres with larvicide and adulticide. We also stocked about 15,000 fish. We answered over 1,300 requests for service throughout the county. And we spread 203,000 pounds of larvicide by helicopter into hard-to-reach or large areas, covering about 30,000 acres. So we definitely miss our helicopter. It covered a lot of ground that we weren't able to cover, like on foot. Our district consists of about 25 employees. We have 1 director and 3 board members. And our total area is 773 square miles. And almost 25% of that is water, especially the low areas that fill up in like Crystal River, like it did this past summer. It gets really hard to control all of the mosquitoes. And that's all I have. I know I went kind of fast in the end, but we do have social medias, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, but it's a work in progress. Don't follow us on LinkedIn yet. But we are Citrus Mosquito on those platforms, so give us a follow if you want to stay updated with us. We have a website, citrusmosquito.org. You can go on there, fill out a service request if you're having a mosquito problem. You can also call us. Our number's listed down there at the bottom. And I do have some informational packets over there on that table if you guys would like to check them out. Our number's on all of that promo material too. Take a mosquito swatter, please. That's what they're there for. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions? Oh, Ken?
Yes.
Question for you. There's things that are out in the market that purport to control mosquitoes. And like there's 3 things in particular that I want to ask. One is mosquito coils that you see advertised. The second one is some type of thing that releases carbon dioxide and then traps the mosquito somehow. And then the third is this persistent thing from Avon about skin soft.
Really? I haven't seen that one. No. Yeah, a lot of those are pretty gimmicky. There's a lot of videos too out there with people wearing like the wristbands and mosquitoes landing right there. So we don't typically recommend those to people. We usually recommend like the picaridin, the DEET, the repellents that like we know for sure work and that are EPA approved, things like that. So yeah, those things, those wristbands and stuff, gimmicky. As far as the carbon dioxide thing, they're attracted to carbon dioxide. So, I mean, as long as you're keeping it away from your house or an area where you are, that I feel like that could be fine.
It's like this thing that releases carbon dioxide, and I think there's some type of vacuum or something. I don't know exactly. That's mosquito net.
It does a good job. Okay, cool. Yeah, I figured it would, just like keep it away from you so like the mosquitoes don't go near you.
And how about genetics to control? You hear stuff about that.
Yeah, like sterile insect technique, is that what you're talking about? Okay, yeah, so we don't do any of that here, but basically what they do with that is they manipulate the male mosquitoes, so when they breed with the females, they can't reproduce, or their offspring won't live very long. So it's pretty harmless to us, especially since it's the males, they don't bite. So I've heard success with it in other counties, but we don't do that here, no.
Is it expensive to do that?
I think so, yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming out, and please come again. coffee and conversation that we have December 1st on the aprons is really kind of a brown bag and lunch thing. So it's at noon here in the courtroom from noon to about 1:30.